Okay, so we're here for the second edition of the Connected Carcast, and we're here with Brett Toby. We're here with Renz Kuipers, and we have a special guest, Mike Rubillo, a longtime software developer. Guys, let's have some fun on this on this talk. I know we've got some really good topics to go over today, and I want to kick it off with one of the biggest things in the news right now, and I know we talked a little bit about this last week, was the whole issue of data privacy. That seems to have reared its head big time over the past couple of days, with Ford telling Congress it protects and collects some driver data, which seems to have gotten former SNL Congressman or Senator Franken up in arms, and then come to find out, C1 of the Wall Street Journal today, we've got the Rockefellers coming back. No comments on the economy. Questioning what all of these data companies are aggregating. What's happening here? Is it finally hitting a head?
Well, it's kind of weird because last week we talked about the NSA privacy thing that was supposed to hit on Tuesday, and my apologies. We dropped the ball. I was getting back from Haiti. It didn't make it onto our website. It had other stuff that was doing, but in some ways it's becoming a very current topic. But in other ways, I mean, this is just a constant drumbeat that's in the background. I don't think it's going to rear its head and go away. I mean, it's just going to be out there.
Are we ever going to get it fixed?
No.
Okay.
I think there's always going to be bad actors. I think we're going to get better at it, though.
Yep.
There's going to be bad actors, but there's also a cultural shift, don't you think, where the previous generation, very concerned about it, our generation, concerned. The generation coming up, I mean, they grew up being tracked. Mm-hmm. So unless there's good actors watching out for that next generation, the conversation disappears, potentially.
Well, I think it's not so much that people are concerned about being tracked. It's about how people are more comfortable being tracked. But it's how is that being used? What's being...
But then therefore, not as concerned about privacy. Terms of service are just glazed over. Privacy policies are glossed over.
Until something bad happens.
Absolutely.
So it might not actually even be an issue of privacy. It might be semantics, right? Because this isn't about privacy then, it's about use.
Yeah.
Right? The data is out there.
It's out there, and that's one of the things where we talk about baking it into the driver's control, because no matter where you fall on the spectrum of semantics or use, if it's the driver's actions, it's in their control. It's kind of hard to argue with that. There are a lot of data aggregators. So you mentioned Senator Rockefeller. He was actually talking about there's some companies that are scouring social media, and they're doing. This guy's on Facebook groaning about his bills. Maybe he's an at-risk consumer. Let's sell that guy as a lead to somebody who's trying to reach out to consumers who maybe need loans or whatever that is. So a little bit kind of predatory. That's kind of creepy. Mm-hmm. And I think Senator Rockefeller's got a kind of a good point about, hey, that sounds uncool. I want to say it was Ed Markey out of Massachusetts who was questioning some of the automotive privacy earlier this year. And then Senator Franken. I'll reserve my Jack Handy comments right now.
Actually met him in the Philly airport once. He was flying cattle like the rest of us with his wife.
He's I've met him a couple times. Very, very personable guy. A big fan of his body of work. We'll just say that. But all that. I think you're right, Mike. It is kind of about semantics and spin, and I think with the control issue, a lot of big companies are just used to saying, well, we just control everything. It's kind of like security. You put everything on the perimeter and pretend that it's all safe on the inside. And I think people are, Renz, you got a good point about they're less concerned about the privacy and the tracking, but they're more concerned about the discretion. They don't like being, told what to do. And, I think it's going to wax and wane, and people are going to get irate about different aspects of it. But I don't see this. I don't see the debate going away.
Well, I have to ask him. do you think that idea of control is really just an illusion? Because, if you have control, for instance, where the NSA or the government is going and asking you for data, that's an illusion because, quite honestly, they're just grabbing cellular data right out of the air.
Yeah.
Uh,
Now, I think it's more about control in relationships. So you take an economic relationship. So the NSA, man, they're the NSA. A bunch of really smart mathematicians in McLean, and you're not going to. That's not a control dynamic that somebody as an individual is going to be able to step in front of. But if I plunk down 40K for a new car, and then somebody says, "Well, we're going to turn around just because you bought this car." Or maybe you bought it secondhand, so you weren't even the guy who bought it new. So you buy it for 20, 25K, and all of a sudden that automaker's saying, yeah, but we still own all your data. It's like, wait a second, man. That's my data.
So then the question. So here's one for you.
Semantics of discretion and control.
So here, Brett. So here's one for you. So
Okay.
when does the data become more of a revenue stream or a significant revenue stream for the automakers, in addition to the profit that they're making on the car?
Well, this is where things get weird because I don't see the automakers being able to effectively. I mean, there's so many of them. In the same way that you need a broker in the API model, that's our role really. You're going to need a broker in that data role, so somebody else is going to step into to do that because the automakers are good at maximizing. How do you move big pieces of metal out of a factory? I don't see them developing an industry capability of doing that. There'll be some other folks who say, hey, we can help you monetize it. That's some of the stuff we do for our connecting partners. Not monetizing the direct sale of the data necessarily, but saying, hey, if you put this out there, other people can run apps and services over the top of it. I just don't see them getting good at it. I mean, they make a lot of margin on like finance services, but it took a long time for that to grab. These guys just don't move fast. I think some of them will get okay, but it's still hard to aggregate. I mean the big guys are only moving 4 million units a year. It's an amazing amount of data flow, but their market penetration flow just is not. I don't see it, and especially with the aftermarket stuff coming into play. It takes the technology cycle is going to pass them by too fast. So.
Cool.
I do see a lot of uses though for sharing data between let's say cross user. Let's say you depersonalize the data, but allow
huge.
people to see it. I think the possibilities are immense.
Well, you know what? It may turn out to be more valuable to the automakers in that metadata context. So it's not about some automaker monetizing Mike or Michael or Renz. It could be about, what do we do? How does our stuff perform compared to somebody else? Toyota. I mean,
Exactly.
1.9 million units under recall, but how many of them really have that glitch? What's the performance model look like? Can we look at the baseline of one group back against another group? The last time Toyota had a huge recall, once they got their hands on everything, it turned out that a lot of those units, almost all of them, didn't need the fix. It wasn't that kind of pervasive thing. But when you don't know, you got to roll it all out there. Mike, I think you mentioned, do we just need longer USB cables at some point? We were talking earlier. I'm not sure that's the fix that they're shooting for, but there definitely is some room for improvement, and the value in the metadata. I think, Michael, your point there is spot on, and I think that's why you see companies like Jaguar Land Rover saying, no, we own everything. All the data, it's like a click wrap agreement when you turn the key over in the ignition. I don't think consumers are going to go for that logic, but that's their, because they haven't figured out a better model for sharing the data. But in the same way that a driver might use Waze or something to share data, they share it back with the automakers.
Well, it's funny. I can see a double-edged sword for the car manufacturer because, kind of like you were saying, if they have a recall, you can see how many cars actually had that problem. at the same point in time, the automaker might not want to have the general public say, look, it took 1 million cars to have this problem before we acted.
Yeah, but if most of the recall, let's use the recall as an example, right? You're pulling a million cars offline just because maybe 10 of them have the issue, right? So
Right.
maybe the numbers actually are smaller, but they have to act, with an umbrella.
Right. Well, I'm just
and-
trying to get to Brett's point where I think the automakers need to spend some time looking at this model because there's potential both ways to make them look good and look bad. They just don't know how to use the data yet.
This week was the Chicago Car Show, and there's automotive is so big you could spend every week going to a different show talking about telematics and what's this value of the information flow. So they had some folks there were talking about what are these new revenue models. S&P gave a good talk about what are the does the information become a new revenue stream for the OEMs, and what is the timing? I think that the jury's still out on what that's going to be. I mean, it takes these guys. It's funny because their meeting cycle, like, hey, let's plan the next meeting, is longer than it's taking some companies to launch products, with our stuff. So I had a conversation last week with an automaker, and they're like, we'd like to have an update on the progress of those developers. I'm like, they're launching. I'm like, wait a minute, you said that you were, last time we talked, you said that you're just talking to some of these guys. I'm like, yeah, well, they're launching products now. So they kind of caught them off guard. I'm like, you can't push back a meeting by 2 months and not expect something to happen in this space. So they're those big shifts in product cycles affect the shifts in the thinking of the companies, and that's where, boy, it's going to be fun to see how these guys just get hit with some of these things, and sometimes they are pretty nimble. Ford, I mean, Mullally was talking about, hey, we need laws to guide us on the privacy side. And Ford took it on the chin with their JD Powers rating because of consumer stuff over the last few years. But I'll give them credit for trying to get out and do it. And their program, their in-dash IVI has gotten much better. So it's still maybe not the UX that people are expecting from other things. Somebody who's a Google Glass consumer might have a different level of expectations than can I get Pandora in my car type stuff.
Right.
Or what you're not saying, can I play Xbox on it?
There's a hell of an argument to be made for control because I don't want some guy who is knee deep in Call of Duty. Yeah, I got we had a bad storm on the East Coast this week, and I got stuck in traffic horribly. And yeah, just because I can put it in park doesn't mean I should be watching, Netflix or playing Call of Duty. So a little bit of discretion on what goes on the dashboard is a good thing.
We've got 100 cars on the Pennsylvania Turnpike sitting there, all crashed up today. We had a massive pile up with the black ice today. So Renz, when we talk about this stuff, and Brett brought up the longer USB cable. So Toyota does this GM and Toyota have done these massive recalls lately, and there was a Twitter conversation yesterday. Why are these computers on wheels, as everybody likes to call them, still being required to go back into the shop to get a software patch? I can get a software patch on my iPhone over the air. And I think it was Brett, or it might have been you, Renz, that said, there's a difference between wired, connected, and connected well. That they're different things.
And of course, core competencies, right? So the automakers, to try to extend what they do into the software space, I mean, it's a different animal, and they need to be cognizant of different risks. That they need to stay focused on the metal, bending it appropriately and putting it together appropriately. So to get vehicles to be really rolling computers, I don't know. I have a hard time wrapping my head around them being able to necessarily delve into that deeply without necessarily offloading that to someone with a core competency to do that.
Mm-hmm. And also, let's be clear, those recalls were mostly with newer cars, I believe. So, what happens, making some of these older cars smarter too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And being able to tell when a certain sensor behaved a certain way, which is very unique in terms of diagnosing a problem because it's real time, as opposed to, I mean, how many of us haven't had that problem where, hey, the check engine light went on, bring the car in to get serviced, and now the light doesn't turn on. So to be able to do that is there's a real need for that. And that's where providing that pipeline, almost like we're talking about that extended USB cable, it's needed. But whether it's the automaker doing it, I don't know if that's necessarily the best pathway.
Kind of
How
like
many cars nowadays? I mean, do you guys know how many cars nowadays are connected to the internet?
Well, connected and connected well is kind of where that was going. Just they're almost all connected to a silo, so that I would say connected to the internet is not really an accurate model. That's one of the things we're trying to enable is take these silos and say, well, you know what, we can free up some of that data flow, so that they're connected, but then connected to what context? Could be connected to an insurance company. There's about 10 million connected car, machine-to-machine data subscriptions right now. That's not the there's probably some more stuff that's intermittent. There's new cars moving into the market, but there's some of the cars that are connected by the automakers are, it's kind of like app fade for your car. So people just don't use it. They don't renew the subscription. Their renewal rates are pretty low. And I think a lot of that speaks to the UX. So what does the automaker delivered connected car experience look like? They're getting much better, but the older cars not so much. So there's quite a few that are connected, and then there's this. Now that we see the cratering of connectivity costs, the cratering of consumer electronics, the AAA's got this awesome set of data. It goes back 50 plus years about what does it cost to drive, and you look at the cost of getting a car connected. You look, we call it roughly $100 a year. It's probably going to cover a connected car. Over the you amortize that over the life of a 36 months, 48 months, whatever it is. In that kind of a market dynamic where you're spending greater than $6,000 a year on your cost to drive, and what kind of features can you get out of a connected car? Is that more than $100 worth a year of value? In some instances, a slam dunk. So I think there's this. We're kind of at that point where we've got about the same number of connected cars now that we had smartphones. I had a Motorola Q when they running a Windows Mobile when iOS finally hit a phone. So they launched the iPhone. We're about the same level of penetration. So about 10 million smartphones when they launched iPhone. We've got about 10 million connected car subscriptions, and the awareness, the cost, everything is kind of just blossoming right now. So I think there's going to be this very, very large rush in the next few years for niche cases at first. It could be, right now we're kind of in this model where unless it comes built in from the factory, you've got somebody who says, well, I want to write an app, but I have to sell this piece of hardware too to enable the app. So it's kind of like going back to I want to have a word processor, but now I got to buy a computer and I got to buy a printer and all this other stuff. It's all
plus there's a lot of discussion almost heading where, okay, I have an iPhone and an Audi. Now I want to get a Ford, and I got traded my iPhone, right?
Yeah,
Chicken and egg.
Yeah.
Yep. So it's there's the initial way through that. There's going to be some data normalization. That's we provide some portion of that. There's some other folks going to provide different aspects of that data normalization, but I mean the economics alone. I mean I'm getting hammered right now for the feature in a couple apps that people are launching, which is we're going to do some expense reporting. It's tax season. Some of our drivers and some of my friends and family are saying, hey, we know this stuff is there. We see it in the dashboard. When can we have that? That's a clear use case where somebody is willing to pay, the cover cost of a connected car just to have that end of the year tax benefit.
Right.
That's a slam dunk.
The advantage for fleets with something like that, with that data.
Yeah, I mean, look at insurance companies. they can cover the cost of a connected car. Now they're not generating any extra value off the extra data, so they're only paying attention to a small portion. But that's a lot of the work that we're doing in the background with these guys. And it takes a long time for these guys just to work through. How do we share the data? Who gets to sign off on sharing the data? That's a fun discussion to have with an insurance company. Saying, hey, you guys are already paying for it. If you share it a little bit, you might be able to make your customers happy and generate some revenue. And to their credit, a lot of these guys are moving with that. But there's some developers who are saying, look, I don't want to wait for an insurance company to decide that I'm okay to run with their customers. We've got developers who are launching products in the next few weeks that people are paying for. Saying, you know what, I'll take that feature set right now, and if I can add other apps, awesome. But that's that. Michael, you were talking about how many connected cars are there. It's a big enough pool right now that it's attractive to go after, and it's also so fractured that I don't think you're going to see a clear winner. We kind of just got lazy and said, well, we don't care. We're going to normalize the data from anybody. We don't care who sells it. We're just kind of data plumbers.
Well, I got to say that's actually one of the reasons I liked your solution, because I think it was Mike who mentioned the chicken and the egg, where you have to choose your phone to see which one's connected. I liked yours because it's kind of built around that standard that's already in all of the cars, correct?
Yeah, and what we're trying to do is, you got this. Cars are fun because they have this thing. It's called the OBD2 port. So I think the law is 18 or 24 inches of the steering wheel. There has to be this port, and that's across the EU and the US and most of the other developed countries in the world. You have to be able to plug this thing in. It's a trapezoid. You can't get it wrong. So you've got this common physical connector. You've got a baseline common flow of data to deal with. It's not great, but it's pretty good. And then more and more we're able to dig deeper and kind of spread. So you look at the data that's in our API right now compared to what's on the vehicle bus.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually a really tasty pile of data if you're a developer. But there's a whole lot more that we can do over time. But we just kind of say, well, what's kind of this broad baseband capability we can put out there? And just because we looked at it, we're like, wow, what a mess. Messes are great opportunities if you're the guy who's selling the tools to clean it up. But it's such a great kind of untapped potential. So you got just enough standardization by law that they can't get away from, and yet there's all kinds of different things about privacy. We own the data, you own the data. So some automakers saying, look, we put the computer there for our use, not for other people's use. And then people are saying, yeah, but I bought the computer, so it's mine. Does that mean that I own the data on my computer? So I think there's going to be some pretty nasty lawsuits flying around. We're privacy guys, so we tend to default to we're going to respect the driver, the owner of the vehicle. That's the kind of the default position we have to take. But it's so much fun watching what people do with this and then seeing how passionate they get on either side of the table.
Sure.
So, Michael, you were saying that you like the approach of just kind of going with whichever one is out there already in that standard baseline. Have you thought about what would you do potentially with a connected car? I know some of the background questions are floating around were APIs and privacy. Were there some particular use cases that were more sensitive or more attractive than others?
Sure. In fact, so I do a lot with data, and I like to collect a lot of data. So I use services, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with these, but like if this, then that, IFTTT.com or Zephyr. I use those services to collect data. And when I saw your API, I thought that would be a perfect use if I could build something to connect to these services, so I could then build databases and actually fill out my when you were talking about taxes. That's perfect for me. I do a lot of driving. I need to follow that. It would be great if I could just input that right into my Excel spreadsheet.
Could Excel, Zoho, we trying to figure out how to price this stuff is I think we almost gave up a little bit on that too. We just said, look, we've got kind of this personal fire hose where spam if you want to really provide some deep analytics. But then, trying to dig into what are some more kind of event-based subscription. I'm looking across the office right now. We've got some Philips, this Hue light bulbs, and you look at what can we do with Zephyr and IFT, and like a home automation hub like Revolve, those Philips light bulbs. So some of the stuff we were kicking around was having the light bulbs flash different colors when different people are coming into the office. So ooh, Renz is almost here, or even better, hey, Brett's driving too fast again. That's and that's the kind of crazy stuff that how do you put a price on it? You probably don't. But we've got an event subscription that kind of floats based on market pricing. So knowing when somebody is low on gas or needs to buy a new car or new insurance, there's an established kind of market price for that, and we want to help the driver kind of step into that flow. Hey, shouldn't be just Experian making money off your data. I think that's a personal thing, but it'll be fun to see what people do as we get into some more of these background integrations like IFT and Zephyr and some of the stuff that we're doing with home automation, home security, other kind of baseline services where the car starts. Actually, I think it might have been the guys at Revolve who came up with the term of anticipatory computing.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, I love that term of letting the things work for you in the background. So, more Bob the Builder than Skynet. That's those are the we're trying to shift the metaphor a little bit for let the machines work for you. But yeah, I love. We'll have to compare notes on IFT and Zephyr offline and see which ones you're looking for, because we've got a few of those things.
Absolutely.
I know Steve O'Grady at Red Monk. He does an annual prediction, an annual list of predictions for developers, and it never comes out when everybody else's is. It always comes out a little bit late. He's a lot of fun that way. But the last one he put, his big prediction was on the wish list was Google acquiring IFT.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see was that his wish list or his prediction?
That's his long range low odd prediction.
Boy, I don't know where to weigh in on that one, because I kind of like IFT the way it is, but it'd be interesting to see what they could do in the background.
That was my reaction too. I'm like, ooh, that would be the potential of something like that is pretty huge.
Yeah. And what's funny is you take something like IFT, and sorry, I'm burning the midnight oil. My computer's telling me, "Hey, plug me in."
Yeah, it killed your video. You're on a frozen video.
Okay. I'll be back on audio or video in a moment. But you take a look at IFT and what they did to bring kind of almost consumer level integration capabilities. And that was very much in our background thinking was, hey, can we do some of that stuff? So if you're one of our drivers already in the dashboard, and you're going to see a number of improvements like this over the next few months, there's background things you can do with event messaging and notifications, and that's going to get bigger and bigger, and providing more just kind of light integrations for you tell my house I'm on my way home, and that way the consumer can start making those connections, and then you still see the developers taking that light connection and making a really good solid UX experience. Because just because we can tell you what the trip was doesn't mean that we're going to be the best place to pump that into your particular QuickBooks integration or whatever it happens to be. So take a look at like RunScope and what they did just coming out of IFT. Wow, now that we've got all these APIs just talking to each other, it's important to know when they're actually talking and still up. I think we're going to see that same kind of explosion in that initial innovation, like we're seeing through IFT and Zephyr, but then also some whole new value streams. Like, oh, wait a minute. Now we didn't anticipate that we needed to have this kind of system in place. So in the same way that we've seen, okay, well, cloud computing, okay, well, now a service like New Relic is really important, or service like RunScope is really important. We're going to see the same thing with connected cars. It might be maybe it's a privacy monitoring service. who knows what it is.
But everything you're talking about there is kind of like added services on top of, and as a software developer, when I hear that, I think of costs. So, for example, if you look at Zephyr, they have some of the things you're talking about, but there are additional costs, and I see that stopping a lot of people from entering that market, even though it would be a perfect solution for them.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you think people are going to overcome that when they come to you for your services?
The cost is a big hurdle. And one of the reasons we sell what we call baseline connecting service, so that's a hardware and a data connectivity package. We really don't like to sell those. We sell them because our developer partners saying, look, we don't have time to wait for, we've got 500 paying customers today who want this software package. And I think right now the software package prices are still higher than they will be over time. So as these silos stop being so structured and start breaking down, then we're going to see the overall cost. It's kind of like the cost of BlackBerry. When BlackBerry first came out, it was like, man, I've got a phone that I can do email on. I did phone and did email, and it was amazing at both. And then it got speakerphone. I was like, wow, that's huge. Big innovation leap forward was, the BlackBerry speakerphone got okay. That's kind of where we are. So there's guys, there's an app that's launching next week. Is it next week? Week and a half from now, something like that.
Yeah.
Ren's got to check the inventory for those guys. That does some really cool stuff with car sharing. And for their model makes sense today. People are going to pay for that today, but the cost, whether it's a value-added service, or something else, that's going to be interesting to see. I think it's as the silos break down, then you can amortize that cost of the infrastructure across more and more. I mean, an iPhone is a ridiculously expensive piece of hardware for what it does, but you can spread that cost out over months. The carrier, I think we'll see models like that evolving.
But
right
we're
now
really
spreading
spreading our cost amongst different partners. So
Yeah.
effectively, our costs get subsidized by additional customers. So the cost of that hardware gets absorbed in the connectivity by one major channel, and then additional developers come on, and the cost of the data for them to deploy their app is really pretty reasonable.
And that's pretty different, isn't it?
I think, Michael, this is probably maybe what we do is we have a 15-minute discussion early next week talking about the economics and like trying to bring what we call bring your own car with the already connected car, and what are the economics around those two, and where we see different apps. I mean, it's kind of like if you look at your apps that are available for in-car, it's Pandora, Stitcher, Slacker. I mean, it's kind of the same thing you glimpse. You're seeing these things pop up because they can be in that scale, and it's kind of like the adverse selection kicking in. I love all those apps, but that's not where you're going to see the innovation. So I think it'd be fun to have a conversation just about APIs, the economics of these additional services. And, we're very paranoid about becoming one of those big fat cost layers. I'm looking at a contract on my desk for some services that we're buying and going, oh, it's useful, but that stuff's expensive. How do we enable the economy without stifling it? So if you'd be game for it, I mean, that would be a good, because that economic discussion around what does the API economy and the connected car economy crossover space look like? How does
from a developer's aspect, I think that's one of the most important aspects we need answered. So I would love to hear about.
Yeah, and that's where I was like, gosh, I don't want to give the pithy answer because that's I like that stuff. Although what's fun is that there's so much about connected cars that because it's so dynamic right now and emerging that we could any one of these topics we turn around and talk about for half an hour.
And we will.
All right.
And we absolutely will. So I want to thank everyone for this week's Connected Car Cast. I'll get it up as quickly as I can. And in the meantime, look forward to talking to everybody next week.
Sounds good. Thanks
All right, guys.
again, Mike.
It was great meeting you. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.